Good afternoon. If I can ask everyone to please take their seats so we can begin this wonderful celebration. So good afternoon again. I am Dean Hari Osofsky of the Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, and I'm thrilled to extend a warm welcome to all of you here today on this very special occasion. We are here to celebrate the incredible career of Professor Marty Redish, who is now in his 51st year of teaching at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, and whose extraordinary contributions include 19 books, over 110 scholarly articles, 23 Supreme Court cites or quotes, and generations of former students who launched their careers through his teaching and mentoring. Can we all just start by giving Marty a huge round of applause? You're going to be getting a lot of those. I would like to extend a special welcome to Professor Redish's family and dear friends who are here today, including his wife of 55 years, Karen, his daughter, Elisa, who's a labor union lawyer, his sister-in-law, Ginny Redish, and his roommate from law school, Don Kaplan, who, in addition to being a partner at K&L Gates, his wife, Evelyn, is also here, and they are Northwestern parents. I also want to acknowledge those important people whose absence is felt today, particularly Professor Redish's brother, Joe Redish, a nationally known physicist whose love and moral support has been so important to who Professor Redish is. So, as a sign of Professor Redish's tremendous impact through his brilliant scholarship, teaching, and mentoring, we are honored to have as speakers today both current Northwestern President Mike Schill and former Northwestern President Morty Shapiro, Provost Kathleen Haggerty, and the Honorable Robert M. Dow Jr., who serves as counselor to Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr., former student and Dean of Supreme Court Bar, Carter Phillips, and his wife, Sue Henry, and as well as former student and professor, Andrea Matwishin, and longtime colleague here at Northwestern, Professor Jim Fander. Can we please just give them all a huge welcome? Our celebration will conclude with the unveiling of his official portrait, which I'm thrilled to announce will hang in LM 212, which will now be known as Marty Redish Hall. At this time, I would like to invite President Michael Schill to the stage to speak more on Professor Redish's extraordinary tenure at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. President Schill took office as Northwestern's 17th president in September 2022. We are delighted that he serves as a professor of law here at the law school, as well as a professor of finance and real estate in the Kellogg School of Management. He previously spent 7 years as president of the University of Oregon, served as dean and professor at the law schools of University of Chicago and UCLA, and also held tenured positions at New York University and the University of Pennsylvania. President Schill is a nationally recognized expert in property, real estate, and housing law and policy, who has made important scholarly contributions through studies of the determinants of value in condominium and cooperative housing, the impacts of subsidized housing programs on property values, the enforcement of fair housing laws, mortgage securitization, and the effects of housing market regulation, and has co-authored one of the most widely adopted casebooks in U.S. law schools. We are very, very grateful for his leadership here at Northwestern and his support of our law school, and especially of this honoring of Professor Redish. Please join me in welcoming President Schill to the stage.
Thank you, Hari, and it is really a pleasure to be here today and I am particularly thrilled that my predecessor, Morty Shapiro, could be with us today to celebrate the career of an amazing faculty member, Marty Redish. Now, as most folks in the room who are law professors would agree, our primary objectives are threefold. First, we train the next generation of legal professionals. Now, at a school like Pritzker Law, that also means training people who will become leaders in business, law, nonprofit organizations, academia, and government. Second, we seek to make original contributions to understanding law and policy. Sometimes these contributions are doctrinal, sometimes they're theoretical, and sometimes they're empirical. And thirdly, we hope that both through our teaching and our scholarship, that we will make a positive impact on the world. Marty Redish does each of these three things extraordinarily well. Marty has made original contributions to legal scholarship in a wide variety of areas, including an area that I am increasingly spending a lot of time thinking and talking about, free speech. Now, over the last year, I have read several books and articles on this subject. One of these is Marty's very original and important, The Logic of Persecution, Free Expression, and the McCarthy Era. I will let you draw your own conclusions about why I found this book so interesting. I also learned much from the more recent, the adversary First Amendment. Now, one of the hallmarks of Marty's scholarship is his courageous commitment to first principles about the purpose of constitutional provisions like the First Amendment. In his work, he has approached First Amendment doctrine in an original way that focuses on the concept of adversary democracy, or in Marty's words, and I'm going to quote, a competition among adverse interests in which the purpose of democracy is to guarantee individuals the opportunity to seek to affect outcomes of collective decision-making according to their own values and interests. Marty, in his work, also reminds us about the importance of viewpoint neutrality and the need for all of us to be consistent when we dip our toes into regulating speech, even when our motivations are pure. Now, in these areas and others, Marty's scholarship has had an important impact in shaping case law and scholarship. Now, Marty's commitment to teaching, the second of our objectives as professors, is extraordinary. Last week, we honored Carter Phillips. While Carter and his family were the stars of the event, what was notable, and I'm sure he'll do it again today, was how Carter singled out Marty and his commitment to his former students. Marty has spent his career here at Northwestern, and I cannot even begin to fathom the number of lives that he has changed for the better. I watched an interview he gave with our law school last year in which he discussed the many strengths of our law school. What caught my attention was a fleeting mention, but an important one, in which Marty talked about his students, many of whom became his research assistants and joined him as co-authors. In fact, I saw that several of them were included in articles that eventually resulted in his most recent book, Due Process as American Democracy. Now, after such a long and illustrious career, after these 50 years, it'd be easy for any academic. It'd be easy to just rest on one's laurels. But Marty doesn't do that. Marty seeks to use his classroom to develop fresh insights and explore new ideas in the law, which are then reflected in his scholarship. So, Marty, as a junior colleague of yours in the law school, I want to thank you for everything you have meant to this university, to this law school, and say that I am proud to be your junior colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, President Schill. That was wonderful. It's now my great privilege to introduce Kathleen Haggerty, Provost of Northwestern University. Provost Haggerty assumed the role of Provost on September 1, 2020, after serving as Associate Provost for Faculty during the 2019-20 academic year, and previously as Interim Dean of the Kellogg School of Management. Provost Haggerty joined Kellogg 40 years ago and holds the first Chicago professorship in finance. She also has held numerous leadership positions within Kellogg, including serving 2 terms as Senior Associate Dean of Faculty and Research, 2 terms as Chair of the Finance Department, and 2 years as Faculty Director of Kellogg's PhD programs. Provost Haggerty has studied the microstructure of securities markets, disclosure regulation, insider trading regulation, and the effectiveness of self-regulatory organizations. And her scholarship has received a Bradley Foundation Research Fellowship and the D.P. Jacobs Prize for the most significant paper in the Journal of Financial Intermediation. I'm extremely grateful for her leadership as provost and her support of our law school, and also being here to support and celebrate Professor Redish. Please join me in welcoming Provost.
Thank you, Hari. It's wonderful to be here. It's also nice to be at an event where somebody has been here longer than me. So I'm getting to the point where I'm always the oldest person, and it's nice not to be. So it's wonderful to celebrate Marty. He is a truly exceptional scholar, practicing attorney, and faculty member. Now, when I was getting ready for this event, I asked some Pritzker alums about their memories of Marty's class. Now, I think no one in this room will be surprised to hear that being a student in Marty's class was a challenging experience. But more importantly, I think what people said about the class was really impressive. So someone told me, this is a quote, that his class was an exceptionally rewarding experience because, quote, he brings a unique perspective to his teaching due to his deep knowledge of American history and how events in American history shape and are shaped by developments in constitutional law. Now, as provost, who's head of the academic part of the university, if this is the kind of thing a student is left with taking a class, I couldn't ask for more. So for a professional school student to say that is like exceptional. So, good job, Marty. Now, very impressive. So, I teach in a professional school, so I know. So now, as provost, I'm often asked to speak to early career faculty about what advice I can offer them as they grow into their career. And Marty Redish presents a very interesting example. Now, Marty himself has said that there is an organic, symbiotic connection between his practice, his scholarship, and teaching. And that's something that Mike Schill has talked about. Marty makes pulling this off, this professional trifecta, seem so natural, when in fact each individual piece is so demanding and so complex. Not many people are able to approach academic life in such a holistic way and succeed. One needs to have the ability to do everything at once and to make connections constantly. Marty's clearly aware of this, and he has on occasion described the way his mind works. So this is a quote from him from the Northwestern Law News recently. When I'm practicing, teaching, or serving as an expert witness, I see gaps and problems in the law, and I'm able to introduce new ideas into the classroom that often result in an article or a book concept. That's why when I think of a successful career in academia and what I would offer as advice to students, early career faculty, or anyone who wants to live a life of service and scholarship, I think about what Marty has done so successfully for decades. So congratulations, Marty.
Thank you, Provost Haggerty, for so wonderfully capturing that way that Marty is able to bring scholarship, teaching, and his practice together. I now would like to share a few remarks about Professor Redish on behalf of our law school before turning to our next speakers. With over 50 years of tremendous contributions at our law school that only continue to grow, It is impossible to overstate Professor Redish's impact as a scholar, teacher, mentor, and on law. Not only has Professor Redish consistently been ranked among the 35 most cited legal scholars of all time, and cited or quoted in 23 Supreme Court opinions, but as part of the Festschrift at our law school held in his honor, Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote, "One cannot seriously engage in the study of constitutional law and federal jurisdiction without taking into account the great body of work produced by Professor Martin H. Redish." Among his many honors, he was the winner of the Association of American Law Schools 2021 Daniel J. Meltzer Award for Frontier Scholarship in the field of federal courts, only the second time the award had ever been given. Professor Redish is always thinking, trying to be ahead of the game, and trying to think outside of the box. But part of what's so extraordinary about this is that his impact began before he even attended law school. Professor Redish decided to be a constitutional law scholar in high school and began conceptualizing his groundbreaking scholarship while still in college and law school. He wrote a paper before law school arguing that flag burning deserved constitutional protection. Despite Harvard constitutional law professor Andy Kaufman calling it iconoclastic to him, Professor Redish became his research assistant, Professor Kaufman became a big mentor, and when the Supreme Court ruled, Professor Redish wrote Professor Kaufman to say, "I told you so." Professor Redish also shared with me that his 1971 article, "The First Amendment in the Marketplace, Commercial Speech and the Values of Free Expression," which argued for First Amendment protections for commercial speech, a line of reasoning adopted by the Supreme Court in 1976, caused Steve Brill to put him in the category of people who destroyed America, led to a lively debate in Lincoln Hall, and was based on his senior thesis in law school. Yeah. His latest book, as President Schill mentioned, Due Process as American Democracy, provides a groundbreaking new approach to due process based on an adversarial understanding of democracy. Professor Gary Lawson said of this book, "Professor Redish's tour de force deftly blends political theory, constitutional theory, and doctrine into a thoughtful, ambitious, and provocative reconstruction of the concept of due process. This is scholarship at its best." Our faculty have also shared what a difference he has made in our intellectual community and their lives. We will be hearing from Professor Fander later in the program, but I wanted to share a few thoughts from just a couple other colleagues about the impact he has had on them. Professor Steve Calabrese expressed, "I will never forget Marty Redish's recruitment of me to join the Northwestern faculty. His brilliance, sense of humor, and energy were awesome to behold. It also caused me to instantly accept on the phone when Dean Robert Bennett extended Northwestern's offer. I now have had an office next door to Marty for almost 30 years, which is a dream come true. I feel very, very fortunate to be his friend and to have had him as my principal mentor." Professor Andy Koppelman shared, "Marty Redish has been my good friend and exhausting interlocutor for more than 25 years. He then explained that when they jointly taught a seminar on theories of free speech, Marty presented his views so persuasively that despite my best efforts, time after time, the students came away with the tragically mistaken impression that he was right and I was wrong. I count on my colleagues to keep me honest, and Marty always rises to the occasion. I'm very grateful." Among the many accolades, awards, and citations, Professor Redish has long expressed that one of the things he is proudest of is teaching. Since 1973, he's taught civil procedure, constitutional law, the First Amendment, and in our path-breaking senior research program. Many of those projects, as we'll continue to hear about today, have resulted in co-authored articles. He's received multiple teaching awards, including, among others, 3 Childress Awards and 2 first-year course teaching awards. The Honorable Michael Scudder of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit captured Professor Redish's incredible teaching and mentoring contributions so well when he shared the following. The reasons to celebrate Marty Redish the scholar are important and many. Allow me a word on Marty Redish the teacher. Little did I know in the fall of 1995 how fortunate I was to draw Professor Redish for civil procedure. His mastery of the subject matter, love of the students, and extraordinary communication skills made the hard work he demanded welcomed and overwhelmed by how much he taught us, not just about pleading standards, the law of personal jurisdiction and the like, but how to think like lawyers. For me personally, he continues, Professor Redish's example and support leave me owing a debt of gratitude I can never repay. To this day, he always looks to help me, and he never stops teaching me, answering questions about hard legal doctrines, recommending a book or article, or explaining how to best make sense of competing developments in cases. Just as I first experienced 30 years ago, Professor Redish also continues to push me to be better and smarter tomorrow by staying a student of the law today. All I know how to say is, thank you, Marty. Nobody does it better. Michael E. Salamine, Donald P. Kleckham, professor of law at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, similarly shared, I was privileged to be a student in 3 of your classes. Your brilliance as a teacher and scholar in no small way inspired me to join the Legal Academy, and not coincidentally, I think, teach those same classes here at UC for nearly 40 years of my own. Law Board member and Vice Chairman of Grosvenor Capital Management LP, Paul Meister, explained, I had Professor Redish for civil procedure in my first semester of law school in 1984. Professor Redish was so incredibly skilled that the class was literally fun and entertaining. We all looked forward to it, and you didn't even realize how much you were effortlessly learning. Sopan Joshi, Assistant Solicitor General, shared, I had Marty Redish all 6 semesters of law school. What can I say? I found his sheer brilliance and passion for law intoxicating. With each passing year, I gain an even deeper appreciation for the intellectual rigor, honesty, and integrity that he always brought to bear. His only truly serious error in judgment has been choosing to root for the White Sox. But that simply shows that he too is human. From the start, Professor Redish's love for his family has been at the core of his life and his Northwestern story. Karen and Marty married while he was in law school, and she came with him when he interviewed at Northwestern. Professor Redish and Karen immediately fell in love with the people at our law school, including former Dean Bob Bennett, Professors Jack Hines, and Bob Childress, Lincoln Hall, and Chicago. They were also tremendously proud of their daughters, Elisa and Jessica, and Professor Redish said to me that, like him, they are change makers. We could not be more grateful for Professor Redish's path-breaking and brilliant scholarly contributions, teaching and mentoring of our students, and the impact that he's had on our law school and society. Professor Adam Hoflick, who is a professor of practice at Northwestern Pritzker Law, partner at Bartlett Beck LLP, and member of our Board of Trustees, expresses Professor Redish's extraordinary impact so well. He said, no member of the faculty has done as much for the law school or made as great a contribution since Wigmore. Please join me in thanking and congratulating Marty Redish. I would now like to welcome to the stage one of Professor Redish's former students, Carter Phillips, who's already been referred to today, of course. Carter Phillips has been appropriately referred to as the Dean of the Supreme Court Bar. He's an incredibly accomplished Supreme Court and appellate litigator who's argued 90 cases before the Supreme Court Bar and more than 150 appellate cases. Together with Rex Lee and with the encouragement of Justice Powell, they established Sidley's Supreme Court and appellate practice, the first of its kind at an appellate law firm, and with it, the Supreme Court Bar. He has made a tremendous difference in so many important cases that help shape the law in foundational ways. We've been so very lucky and honored at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law to have Carter share his tremendous expertise with our students and make a difference for those in need of representation in the Carter G. Phillips Supreme Court and Appellate Advocacy Center, it never gets old to say that, since its founding nearly 20 years ago, and also provide leadership on our law board. As co-director of the Carter G. Phillips Sidley Austin LLP Supreme Court Clinic and adjunct professor at the law school, Carter has given countless of our students the opportunity to learn from one of the most influential and successful Supreme Court and appellate litigators in the country, in many ways paying it forward. At Northwestern, Carter participated in our senior research program and was able to work closely with Professor Marty Redish, and they jointly published an article in the Harvard Law Review, a wonderful example of Professor Redish's extraordinary mentorship and intellectual engagement with our students. This past week, we celebrated Carter's contributions and the center and clinic's renaming at an event where Professor Marty Redish was one of the speakers, and Carter did give a little bit of a warning that he was getting to speak this week. It's wonderful now to have Carter Phillips a few days later speaking at today's event honoring his mentor, Professor Redish's extraordinary contributions. Please join me in welcoming Carter Phillips.
I cannot tell you what a privilege it is to sort of represent the literally hundreds, if not thousands, of students who have benefited from Marty's thoughtful and insightful teaching style and put them on the road to a path of great professional success. And so thank you for allowing me that opportunity. And what do you say about a scholar who has been cited like the 20th most of all scholars in the history of legal academia? I mean, as a comparison, I mean, that's the Oklahoma City of the United States, which is, which I thought about that for a little bit, and I realized that the last time I was up here talking about Marty, he was the Louisville, Kentucky of the United States. So I'm not sure whether he's moved up or down in the scheme of things, but it's nice to see that he's still right there solidly in the Midwest. The other thing that struck me about Marty, about the dean's comments about Marty's academic achievements is that, Marty, you kind of flamed out a little early, right? You had commercial speech in high school and college, and in Harvard Law Review right after you started. And what have you done since then? One of the other things about the list that disturbed me, though, as I was looking at these lists of scholars, is when we wrote our article together, it was Erie and the Rules of Decision Act, In Search of the Appropriate Dilemma. What a stupid title. That was no doubt your idea. That could not have been my idea. But in any event, so I was looking at that article. Now that is an article as a sort of a takeoff on a piece that John Hart Ely wrote. And I said to Marty, I think if we play our cards right here, we write this as an article about what the Supreme Court said in Hanna versus Plumer, and we put a CF cite at the very end to John Hart Ely, and we run this article. Instead, Marty said, no, that's not academically fair. You got to really cite the guy. So I think we cited him about 1,000 times. What disturbs me is he comes into the rankings right above Marty, right? If we had cited him once instead of 1,000 times, right, Marty could have been the Denver, Colorado of law professors. But no, we couldn't have that. There's no question that that article started me off on an extraordinary career. It served as a topic of conversation in all three of my interviews for Supreme Court clerkships. I have no doubt that without that, I would not have succeeded in any way in that regard. And that was just, and for those of you who are students, if you haven't had the opportunity to take advantage of the senior research program, please do. It is one of the most remarkable opportunities that any law school can provide. I think the one at Northwestern is quite unique, and having a chance to work with Marty was extraordinary. Now, it doesn't come without pain. To be sure. I still have serious bruises and scars on my back. Marty said, he doubted, this is wonderful, second guessing of life, I suppose. He said last week when we had the evening for me, he said, I was simply training him to get ready to argue in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And I said, you really did a really good job of it because you never asked any questions. You just simply barked at me, which is exactly what the justices do. Little did you know that was how that the court was going to turn into that kind of an institution at that time. The good news is that I didn't have to just take all of Marty's grief for the entirety of my life. Eventually, the worm did turn. And Marty came to work at Sidley Austin while I was on the management committee of the firm. And I got to tell you, it was a really nice feeling to finally say to him, you know what, we're going to do this my way. and the only problem with Marty is that you would give him something to do, and he would come back with this unbelievably complete document in 30 minutes. I said, we work on an hourly basis, Marty. I can't make any money on 30 minutes. You know, you gotta stretch it out. I didn't need a chat GBT. I needed a little more time than that. Anyway, the thing that has really struck me throughout all the years since I've been at Sidley is that every year I've been on camp, now on-campus interviewing is becoming more complicated, but up until this year, I used to come on campus every year. I would meet with the students. I have to tell you, I think Marty has done more for my personal reputation than anybody, because he would always, for some reason, talk about me to his students. So all these students seem to know me better than I knew myself, because Marty had made me bigger than life to those students in ways that I did not deserve, but I'll take it. It's not bad. I reached out to the 120 former Northwestern alums who work at Sidley, and I got back that more than 90% of them had Marty as their professor. Most of them, of course, went into transactional work after a year. No, that's not true. The vast majority of them actually did go into litigation. My daughter, who was not part of that survey, nevertheless said that she has gotten more value out of everything that Marty taught her from civil procedure than anything that I have taught her. So it's just at least a little dispiriting to me, I have to confess. But what was even more remarkable to me is the warmth and the genuine appreciation for you as a professor that all of those students, soon to become active professionals and incredibly successful professionals, they all pointed back to that grounding they got in civil procedure and the importance of it and the enthusiasm that they brought to it. And I suppose the greatest compliment I can pay to you, Marty, is, you know, I tried as hard as I could to become a mini Marty, right? I went to the University of Illinois, I taught civil procedure, I used the same casebook, and I realized after 2 years I was never going to be able to do anything half as good as Marty, so I decided to go take a turn and went off into private practice. I know you've never forgiven me for doing that. I get that, but you know, you set the standards way too high. You have been an absolute gem and a resource to this law school, and every student here and every student who's been here for the last 51 years owes you an enormous debt of gratitude. Thank you so much, my friend.
Amazing. I'm now pleased to introduce another one of Professor Redish's former students and my former colleague, Andrea Matwishin, Associate Dean of Innovation and Technology at Penn State Law. Dr. Matwishin is an academic and author whose work focuses on the intersection of technology design, innovation policy, and law, particularly information security, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, health tech and infodemiology, consumer privacy, intellectual property, technological competition, and workforce pipeline policy. And yes, that is just a short version of the various ideas she puts together in incredibly innovative ways. Professor Matwishin is a professor in the Law School and Engineering School at Penn State, the Associate Dean of Innovation at Penn State Law, University Park, and the founding faculty director of both the Penn State Pilot Lab, which stands for Policy Innovation Lab of Tomorrow, an interdisciplinary technology policy lab, and the Anuncia Donesia Song Song Manglona Lab for Gender and Economic Equity, a technology equity lab and clinic. Most important for today, though, Professor Redish was her third-year research advisor in 1999, a colleague in 2003 to 2005 at the start of her teaching career, and has been an incredibly important mentor to her. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Matwishin.
So I'm one of those students that did go into transactional law. So thank you very much for the kind invitation to allow me to share a few words in tribute to Marty's incredible career. I have understood my assignment to focus deeply on his scholarship, so that's what we're doing. But I will first say that as an academic for me who studies a topic that is superficially entirely unrelated to the areas that Marty's work is focused on, it's actually Marty's work that is one of my secret weapons, because I know that I have come on a good idea, a proper framing of a technological policy construct, or a potentially successful path forward in policy if it passes the Redish test. So basically, his scholarship, which is written with a level of precision and abstraction that allows for it to be used in subsequent generations of policy, offers something that gives forward as well as retrospectively analyzes the case law that led to its creation. Without further ado, I will point out that Marty's scholarship is not merely the 110 articles on Westlaw, as we heard, because Westlaw only started posting things from 1975. So Marty's been writing scholarship longer than I've been alive. The first generation of Marty's scholarship that many people, I think, encounter relates to his First Amendment theory. One of my favorite interviews of Marty is one where they called him the godfather of commercial speech. So please just mentally imagine the still from the movie with his head superimposed on one of the dramatic scenes. Perhaps stroking a cat. Yes, so in the First Amendment scholarship, Marty focuses most recently on issues of compelled commercial speech, and as usual, he advocates a nuanced perspective and not merely a one-size-fits-all approach to commercial speech going forward, even in compelled speech contexts. Other recent work has engaged with analysis of unlawful advocacy, political fraud, democratic theory and self-expression, of course, including in particular his self-realizational approach, which has spawned many different iterations in scholarly thought, including in my own. With respect to the second main prong of his work, which focuses on civil procedure, federal jurisdiction, including the casebooks that have been used by generations of students that we've heard so much about, recent work has included critiquing the class action vehicle, as well as assessing discovery cost allocation and due process dynamics. The most recent work, as we've heard, his book Due Process as American Democracy, focuses on questions of separation of powers, as well as questions of administrative agency, authority, and adjudicatory process, a topic near and dear to my heart as someone who has been appointed to multiple federal agencies and who doesn't necessarily precisely align with some of the conclusions. But the analysis is, as usual, above reproach. And so with that, I would like to offer a brief articulation of the thesis, but also to read some of the nuance and prose that has made Marty the best in the business. So in the book, he introduces the idea of adversary due process, which he explains in this way. As is true of private individuals or entities' efforts to influence other governmental branches, efforts to influence the decisions of judicial or administrative entities are appropriately seen as forms of adversary democracy. Efforts to employ governmental processes as means of furthering or protecting private interests. It's therefore necessary and appropriate to determine which processes are required by the Due Process Clause by viewing them through the lens of adversary democracy. That is, a framework in which all individuals and entities are allowed to assume that they are adverse to all other private and governmental individuals and entities, and they are therefore allowed to operate on a presumption of suspicion of the intentions of all governmental and private actors. So that is the theory that animates the adversary due process concept. He also introduces the concept of skeptical optimism, which is the underpinning of this process. And he describes the process of skeptical optimism in this way. The factors that animate adversary due process turn fundamentally on the application of the skeptical optimism premise. Human flourishing can only be advanced if we are skeptical and mistrustful of the actions of governmental and other private actors in playing a role in the deprivation of an individual's liberty or property interests. The book is spectacularly interesting and nuanced and well-researched, and I will be poring over it for months to come. But as my version, I have a little bit of the Redishian directness gene in me, so I'll take this opportunity to issue a bit of a challenge for book 20, because I know there's at least one more book in there, because the cat is not on the roof. So here's my challenge for book 20. So in this excellent book, Due Process is American Democracy, there is one line that I really wanted to know more about. Here's the line. The transformation of the ALJ Corps by making them employees of the US government generically rather than of the particular agency and significantly increasing their independence could go very far toward improving the adjudicatory neutrality of the administrative process. I would like a whole book on that, please. Particularly in light of Loper-Bright, in light of Jerkesi, in light of your own skepticism in this book. You've identified amply what some of the challenges are to the legitimacy of these processes. I would like to know more about how to fix them in a way that scales in light of the 21st century challenges that are the remnants of the 20th century doctrinal challenges that you have identified so ably in this book. So that's my throwdown. And thank you for an amazing career, and on behalf of all of the students that have benefited from your wisdom, words can't begin to express how much we value it.
If that challenge were given to anyone else, it wouldn't be realistic. I have a feeling we may actually see that book in about a year. Now I'd like to invite to the stage Judge Robert Dow Jr. Judge Dow is the counselor to Chief Justice of the United States, John G. Roberts Jr., a role he was appointed to in 2022. As counselor, he serves as the Chief Justice's Chief of Staff, working closely with court officers on court-wide policies and initiatives. He also supports the Chief Justice as the head of the federal judiciary, working in partnership with court executives and judges on matters of judicial administration, and as liaison to the executive and legislative branches on issues affecting the court. He also supports the Chief Justice in his non-judicial responsibilities, including as Chancellor of the Smithsonian Institution. Judge Dow came to this role from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, where he's made such a difference advancing justice. It was wonderful and an honor to hear about his incredible impact from colleagues as he headed into his new important leadership role. Prior to his service on the bench, Judge Dow was an associate and partner at Mayer Brown, where he focused on telecommunications matters in the litigation practice and was a member of the firm's Supreme Court and Appellate Practice Group. His practice also included state and federal constitutional law, jurisdiction, civil procedure, preemption, mass torts and product liability, admissibility of expert testimony, and class actions. Before joining Mayer Brown, he served as a law clerk to Judge Joel M. Flom of the United States Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago. And we could not be more grateful here at Northwestern Pritzker Law that despite all these things I just told you, Judge Dow still finds time to serve as an adjunct professor here at the law school, where he co-teaches complex litigation with Judge St. Eve. How lucky are our students to have the opportunity to learn from them. And they even occasionally include some amazing guest appearances by members of the Supreme Court. So please join me in welcoming Judge Dow.
Thank you very much, Hari, for that kind introduction, and thank you for the honor of being able to speak today about my friend Marty Redish. As you all have heard, Marty is a true giant in the world of civil procedure. I did not know all the statistics, but I knew Hari had them, so I didn't worry about that. But I will say, based on all of my experience of the last 17 years, that Marty's views carry great weight with Supreme Court justices, lower court judges, scholars, rule makers, and generations of law students. I was also very happy to learn in the last few minutes that I am in the good company of my accounting professor, Andy Kaufman, as in the long list of people who Marty Redish has said, "I told you so." And I have a story about that in a moment. So my first encounter with Marty was not an in-person one. It was in my first day of law school when I made a contribution to his retirement fund by purchasing a copy of Marcus, Redish, and Sherman, Civil Procedure, The Modern Approach. That's how I learned civil procedure. I had a wonderful civil procedure professor, Martha Minow, and that's where I learned civil procedure. So imagine how excited I was shortly after law school when I first met Marty. It was right here at Northwestern Law School. That year I was clerking for, as Hari said, a very distinguished graduate of this law school, Joel Flom. And one of my co-clerks, Mike Anderson, had been one of Marty's students. So Mike had arranged for the 3 Flom clerks to come over here and judge an early round of the minor moot court competition. And because Marty had taught Mike, there was a little dinner beforehand, a little buffet dinner. So Marty sat down with us at dinner, and he asked us what we were working on. Mike very proudly told Marty that we're working on some civil procedure matters, including an 11th Amendment case, which is called Francis J. versus Wright. You can find it in 19F 3rd if you're really interested. Much to our chagrin, Marty not only had read the case, but he was sure that it was wrong. And he told us all the reasons he thought it was wrong. We law clerks were, as the kids say today, shook. Our professor just told us that the decision we just worked on, that we got our judge to sign off on, wasn't right. Well, I'll tell you the other side of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Those of you my age and older will know what I'm talking about. 4 years later, in Wisconsin Department of Corrections versus Schacht, Justice Breyer delivered the opinion for a unanimous court confirming that, in fact, Marty was right and Francis J. was wrong. Let me now fast forward a few years to the late 1990s and early 2000s, about a mile south of here at the Hyatt Center. Those were, as Hari said, those were my Mayor Brown years, and happily for me, those were also Marty's Mayor Brown years. I didn't know Marty had Sidley years too, but you know, can't always win. I worked very closely at Mayor Brown with another distinguished graduate of this law school, John Mensch, who was Carter's co-clerk for Judge Sprecher, and then he went on to a clerkship with Justice Stevens. And John, in his first life, before he had 7 kids, was an academic. Once he got to 7, he decided the academic life was no longer for him, and he needed the Mayor Brown salary. But he had worked with Marty, and I think they'd done a law review article together when John was at Illinois and Marty was here, of course. So John knew the talent that we had available to us. And John and I Mayor Brown was a very egg-heady firm in those days, and John and I were in the higher end of egg-headness of even an egg-headed firm. So we got a lot of civil procedure questions. And often we would noodle those civil procedure questions for a day or so. And at the end of the day, if we didn't have the answer, we would just look at each other and say, all right, let's call Marty. Now, Carter's already described what happens when you call Marty. Marty was fantastic at solving these problems. He just wasn't with the business model. So in the morning, or sometimes even that evening, there would be what we referred to as a Martygram. And the Martygram could be 10 pages, it could be 20 pages, but it was everything you ever needed to know about whatever topic we had given him. Now, our clients weren't civil procedure scholars either, so we would send this memo to the client, and the client would often say, do you think this is right? And we would say, well, Marty literally wrote the book on this subject, so I'm betting that it's right. The clients were quite impressed, and the bill was pretty small. I left Mayor Brown, and that might not have been the best deal for you, Marty. I don't know what kind of deal you had. I left Mayor Brown in 2007. I did not encounter Marty again until sometime in 2016 in a conference room at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. Now, if you find yourselves in a conference room at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in the afterlife, you probably did not have a good interview at the pearly gates. But it was a very convenient place for the Civil Rules Advisory Committee to gather 24 of the best lawyers, academics, and judges from around the country to talk about proposed amendments to the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. In this instance, the amendments under consideration were Rule 23, the class action rule. I was the chair of the subcommittee that put the rule together. Marty's co-author, Rick Marcus, was the reporter drafting it, so naturally Marty was on the guest list. One of the amendments would have created a rule for the handling of cypre payments. Now, you have to be pretty nerdy to know what I'm talking about at this point. A cypre payment doesn't come up that very often. And we thought, we, the committee, had crafted a rule for the handling of cypre payments, and we didn't think it was terribly consequential or really that controversial. But as we rolled our way around the room, Marty Redish did not think it was a good idea. And Marty pointed out the flaws, including his contention that our proposal ran afoul of the Rules Enabling Act. And that is actually a mortal sin for rulemakers, because we rulemakers want to make sure that Congress respects our side of the aisle on the Rules Enabling Act and our authority that they've given to us, and we don't want to get on the wrong side of that. So at the end of the day, after all those nice academics and scholars and judges had left, all that was left was Ed Cooper, Rick Marcus, John Bates, and Dave Campbell, the chairs of the committee and the reporters. And we all looked at each other and pretty much simultaneously said, you know, Marty's right. And if you look today at amended Rule 23, which had quite a number of provisions that were amended, you'll see not a word about cypre. Finally, I want to just offer Marty a word of personal gratitude, and in this part of my speech, I'm speaking on my own behalf and Judge St. Eve's behalf as well. So Amy and I wanted to teach complex litigation, but we had no idea how to do that or even how to get started. So we invited Marty and Adam Hoflick, who was referred to earlier today, to lunch at the Union League Club, and this was shortly before the pandemic. And before the lunch was over, we had a model syllabus, we had casebook ideas, and most importantly, we had a full tailwind of encouragement. This spring will be our 5th year doing this. It's a great honor and a joy to teach here. And it's wonderful to be wannabe civil procedure professors at one of the greatest civil procedure departments in the world. So we have Marty and Adam to thank for that, and it's a joy for us to do. And I don't think we never would have got off the ground except for that lunch. So I just wanted to say to my long-term mentor, a brilliant scholar, a trusted friend, a valued colleague, and a true role model, congratulations, Marty. Thank you for inspiring all the students that you've inspired over the years. And I know this is nowhere near the end of your career, so I'll look forward to that next book. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Dow. That was wonderful. It's now my great pleasure to invite to the stage one of our incredible Northwestern Pritzker Law professors, and of course, Professor Redish's longstanding colleague, O.N.L. Kuhn Professor of Law, Jim Fander. Professor Fander has focused his teaching and research on the role of judicial systems in constitutional democracies. His latest book, Cases Without Controversies, Uncontested Adjudication in Article III Courts, from Oxford University Press, explores the history of litigation in the courts of the United States, showing that Congress had the power to assign federal courts cognizance of no injury claims to register a claim of right under federal law. With an interest in the comparative effectiveness of judicial oversight in other systems, Professor Fander has taught and lectured in the Czech Republic, Israel, Morocco, Romania, and the United Kingdom. A member of the American Law Institute, Professor Fander recently concluded his work as reporter-consultant to the Federal State Jurisdiction Committee of the Judicial Conference of the United States. He has served as chair of both the federal courts and the civil procedure sections of the Association of American Law Schools. Now, he and Professor Redish have been close colleagues and collaborators for years, including co-authoring together. And I just want to say, as dean, that I'm very grateful for all that Professor Pfander contributes through his scholarship as a wonderful teacher and as a leader in our law school and the profession. Would you please join me in welcoming Jim Pfander to say a few words?
Thanks, Hari. Thanks, everybody. It's an honor to say a few words about the career and legacy of so accomplished a scholar and teacher and so good a friend as Marty Redish. I'll talk a little bit about Marty's scholarship, particularly his work in the fields of civil procedure and federal jurisdiction. For 50 years, Marty's work in these and other fields has put Northwestern on the map as a center for scholarly engagement. It's been my privilege to work alongside Marty on some of these problems, joining him as a co-author on a procedure casebook and a jurisdiction casebook, and frequently sharing drafts and senior research projects with him along the way. He's invariably kind and supportive, prompt and piercing in his commentary, as you might guess. Blessed with a nearly photographic memory, and to be honest, he's among the funniest law profs in the groves of academe. Just the other day, Marty busted me up with a story about the simple purchase of ripe bananas. What makes Marty's scholarship so compelling? Well, I confess I've tried to reverse engineer some of his best-known papers in the hope that a little Marty magic might rub off on me. Here's his MO. There we go. Marty chooses important topics, knowing instinctively that something the rest of us just might overlook has wide-ranging implications. Consider his paper in the Yale Law Journal on the abstention doctrine. He was, basically 40 years ahead of his time, arguing that abstention poses a threat to a separation of powers values by empowering courts to refrain from exercising jurisdiction in matters that have been assigned to them by Congress. It's among the best known and best regarded pieces in the federal court's canon, and sure enough, the court has come very close to adopting Marty's suggestions. Apart from a growing distaste for abstention, the court, in a case called Lexmark, has cast doubt on a range of prudential doctrines that had come to support some judicial refusals to adjudicate for reasons nicely anticipated in Marty's work. When we held a festschrift honoring Marty's work a decade or so ago, all three of the scholars on the Fed Court's panel chose to comment on that particular paper. Note to self, pick a good topic. Okay, having chosen a topic wisely, Marty brings a fresh perspective to the problem, often, as we've heard, informed by a theory of democratic governance. Courts, on Marty's view, exist to enforce minority rights and protect constitutional values. They stray from their lane when they impede democratic governance or overcall a choice properly made by the people's representatives in Congress. Democracy, fundamentally, explains Marty's view that Congress has broad power to shape and curtail the jurisdiction of the federal courts, a perspective from which the Biden Commission on Court Reform might have learned a thing or two. Anyway, democracy and support for the demos also explain Marty's deep commitment to the people's right as individuals to seek redress in the court system, a right guaranteed by due process of law. Deceptively simple, such theoretical insights profoundly shape Marty's work. He defends the individual day in court ideal based on ideas of party dignity and autonomy, and that theoretical commitment has led him to pose important questions about forms of mass litigation that have grown up around us, from the rise of mass tort class actions to the rise of mass tort MDLs. Note to self, go beyond the doctrine and use social and political theory to frame your projects. Marty has been an incisive and consistent defender of the Seventh Amendment right to trial by jury, a right that both ensures popular engagement and provides important and much overlooked checks on governmental tyranny. Marty's work on jury trials and the administrative state was cited just a few months ago by the Supreme Court in a decision restoring jury trials in agency enforcement proceedings. True to form, Marty brushed off the citation and excoriated the court for having been right for the wrong reasons. Note to self, stick with your ideas. Having identified a topic and developed a theoretically compelling approach to the problem, Marty writes with a clarity and power, laying out the issues and proposing solutions. Almost invariably, Marty provides a clear answer, no muddled balancing tests or questions of more or less. Then he defends the answer with a tenacity and verve that few can match. Does the First Amendment protect speech? Well, then by golly, it protects commercial speech. Do jurisdictional statutes restrict the power of the federal courts? Well, then by golly, the courts need to refrain from assuming the existence of jurisdiction and dragging the parties through an unfounded proceeding. Note to self, develop a clear and compelling thesis that offers answers the legal system can readily adapt. If you tie all these bits together, you may succeed as a scholar, but you still need a distinctive title to capture the essence of your work. Marty, as it turns out, has something of a flair for the eye-catching title. A few of my personal favorites. Federal jurisdiction as statutory interpretation, a major domo purposivist perspective. What's a major domo, you rightly ask? And I say, see, it's working. Think Zazu from The Lion King. Fear, loathing, and the First Amendment. Marty Redish meets Hunter Thompson. Avoiding death by 1,000 cuts, way more evocative than a slippery slope. Taking a stroll through Jurassic Park, every lawyer's nightmare. Federal jurisdiction in the Martian Chronicles, invoking Bradbury's dystopian vision of the future. Note to self, engage your readers from the get-go. I know what you're thinking. Hey, Professor Vander, if you have Marty's secret recipe for scholarly success, what happened? I can only say that in public law at Northwestern, there's Marty Redish, and then there's everybody else. Marty's been among the most cited academics in the country for many years now. He's won the Career Achievement Award for contributions to the law of federal jurisdiction and other forms of recognition too numerous to mention. I'm mighty proud to be among the folks who've had the special pleasure of learning from Professor Redish. I've been here for almost 20 years of his 50-year run, and I have little doubt that my work reflects his influence in ways large and small. I used to think that I would one day speak at his retirement party, but it's beginning to look like he's going to be speaking at mine. To my friend, my colleague, and my scholarly role model, Marty Redish.
Thank you for sharing those important lessons with us, Jim. It's now my privilege to introduce President Emeritus of Northwestern University, Morty Shapiro. He's a professor of economics in Northwestern's Judd A. and Marjorie Weinberg College of Arts and Sciences, and also holds appointments in the J.L. Kellogg School of Management and the School of Education and Social Policy. He served as the 16th president of Northwestern University from September 1, 2009 to September 12, 2022. President Emeritus Shapiro is among the nation's leading authorities on the economics of higher education, with particular expertise on college financing and affordability, and on trends in educational costs and student aid. He's testified before U.S. Senate and House committees on economic and educational issues, and is widely quoted in the national media on those issues. He's written more than 100 articles and written or edited 9 books, and in 2010 was elected a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in 2017 was elected to the National Academy of Education. We're incredibly grateful for his important leadership here at Northwestern and more broadly, and that he's able to join us today in honoring Professor Redish. Please join me in welcoming Professor Emeritus Shapiro.
Who knew law professors were so funny? I thought it was just economists. I had no idea you were so funny. I went to a number of law school meetings, faculty meetings when I was president, and there weren't a lot of laughs that I remember, at least not in front of me. Hari, thank you for inviting me to say a few words as we celebrate an all-time great, our very own Marty Redish. Welcome everyone to the New York Mets watch party. The first pitch was 5 minutes ago. We heard before that Marty adopted the Chicago White Sox as his team many years ago, but it's funny, after your adopted team loses 121 games, you rediscover your first sports love, the New York Mets. And there's no way Marty Redish would schedule a celebratory event during the 5th game of the playoffs. So I don't know what that's about, but I do know I'm neither a law professor, hence not funny, nor a lawyer, not even less funny, I guess, but I recognize academic excellence, Marty, when I see it. Marty is without a doubt one of the most accomplished scholars and teachers, not only at the law school, but at our entire university. A dozen years ago, I also attended the conference held in Marty's honor. And I gotta tell you, I was so moved by the stories of how his research has literally transformed the legal profession and how his extraordinary teaching has impacted generations of lawyers. And I was amazed, Marty, to learn that it all started from your job market paper. Now, those of you who are not academics probably don't know, but job market papers are written with a simple goal in mind: to get a job. That's why they're called job market papers, duh. If your job market paper ends up having a lasting influence on your discipline, I don't know if Mike, Kathleen, and others, if it ever did, that's an unexpected bonus. I, for one, am quite fond of my job market paper. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It was actually published in a pretty good economics journal, and some 45 years later, that paper has been cited, no, not hundreds of times like your paper, or thousands like your books, but 56 times. Now, that's not great, but it's not terrible, until you figure out that I did, as I figured out last week when I went on citation, that literally half of those 56 citations to my job market paper were by me. I swear to God, I am not kidding. Half of those citations have been by me, which means I published a lot of other stuff. But anyway, Marty, on the other hand, as we heard over and over again, wrote a job market paper that changed the way people think about the First Amendment. And to no surprise, he got the job. How fortunate for Northwestern. And as we heard over and over again, it was just the beginning of an extraordinary publishing career. Never one to rest on his laurels, Marty has consistently been ranked among the most cited legal scholars of all time. I don't know what city that makes him, but it's a big city, a big city. Many luminaries have made this law school one of the world's greatest. But Marty, as Adam Hoflick, our close mutual friend, has said, when people think about the best of NU Pritzker law, they think of you. I salute you. I thank you for your friendship for me during my presidency and all your support. And it's been a real treat, as I referred to before, to have a fellow Mets fan here in the Chicagoland area. You know, Marty, I bet you and I are literally the only two people in the room who are mourning our late but not very great catcher, Jerry Grody. I don't know if anybody else of you heard, but it really hit me when he passed. And I bet you this is his picture. Jerry Grody, here he is. No, I hope it's not. Just as our beloved Mets have energized the baseball world this past year, shockingly so have you, Marty, energized the legal profession through your brilliance, your thoughtfulness, and your dedication. I trust that you'll be able to step back and reflect on 51 years now of remarkable achievements, with many more to come. The rest of us mere mortals are literally in awe of you. Thank you, Marty, and may God bless you and your beautiful family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Emeritus Shapiro. That was wonderful, and I know we're all thinking about the Mets now. But today would, of course, not be complete without hearing from our guest of honor himself. So as we welcome Professor Marty Redish to the stage, will you please join me in another round of gratitude for his extraordinary contributions to scholarship in field-defining ways, to generations of our students, and to the legal profession and society.
Thank you all so very much. Sort of overwhelming. I've given many speeches to a variety of audiences, never expecting in my wildest imaginings that I would have an event like this to give a speech at. I come from a family of academics. My father was a teacher and a scholar. My brother was a teacher and a scholar. And long before I went to law school, I knew what my path would be. As I now look back over my career, I can say with confidence that I would not trade it for anything. I have been able to achieve something very few can claim. I've lived out my dream. A classroom that will from now on be known as Redish Hall is a large and glorious seminar room filled with Northwestern's law's tradition, located literally at the center of our most famous building, Levy-Mayer Hall. To see the room, you will need to enter Levy-Mayer, the building adjacent to this one. Built in 1926, Levy-Mayer Hall is one of the greatest law school buildings anywhere. If you have never seen it or haven't seen it recently, I urge you to take a look. But a word of warning. Watch out for ghosts. Not the kind of ghosts to be feared on Halloween, but rather the ghosts of those who provided Northwestern law with its magnificent tradition, in which we all take such great pride. The first ghosts you're likely to see are those of two of the great Supreme Court justices of the second half of the 20th century, Arthur Goldberg and John Paul Stevens. If you really try hard enough, you can see them studying constitutional law in Lincoln Hall, being taught by a young Nat Nathanson, the most famous constitutional scholar in Northwestern law history, whose portrait hangs on the walls of Lincoln Hall. After that, you will see the ghosts of two presidential candidates who combined to lose 5 presidential elections. And that's not easy to do unless you're either running against Dwight Eisenhower or are dumb enough to challenge the gold standard. Then you are likely to see the ghosts of 3 ambassadors to the United Nations in a row. Yes, 3 UN ambassadors in a row were Northwestern law graduates. There are so many others. Graduates who are leading scholars such as Raoul Berger at Harvard and Bob Rabin at Stanford, important members of Congress such as Senator Dale Bumpers, cabinet members such as Labor Law Secretary Willard Wirtz, political pioneers such as Harold Washington and Dawn Clark Netsch, nationally known judges such as David Bazelon, the student, and Carl McGowan, the professor, leaders of the bar and successful business persons, including owners of 2 Major League Baseball teams. One of them not being the Mets. I have only scratched the surface of the school's amazing heritage, but on our tour, I want to skip ahead to take you to see the greatest ghost of them all, the ghost of John Henry Wigmore. John Henry Wigmore is to this day universally recognized as among the greatest legal scholars of all time and the greatest legal scholar in the history of Northwestern law. But he was so much more than that. From 1901 to 1929, Wigmore was the dean of Northwestern law, transforming it into one of the nation's leading law schools. In 1925, he almost single-handedly designed Levy-Mayer Hall. But even more important than that, Wigmore wrote the school song. Old Northwestern, that's where we learned our law. It was a big hit in the early years of my career. But I guess that, much like the Macarena, familiarity caused it to lose its appeal. But during the early years of my career, on the landing right below Redish Hall were the Wigmore chimes. Every day at noon, they would play the school song. And every day, much like Pavlov's dogs, upon hearing those chimes, I would salivate, instinctively assuming that the good humor man was coming. In short, Northwestern Pritzker School of Law has a long and wonderful tradition rivaling that of any law school in the land. And with the events of today, I suppose I have officially become part of that great tradition. I am both humbled and honored by such wonderful recognition. I only hope I continue to bring honor to the school I love so much. I have a few thank yous I want to give. This is going to take a couple of minutes, so please bear with me. First, my thanks go to Dean Hari Asofsky, who has exhibited graciousness throughout the planning of this event and was so kind the first time we discussed it to emphasize she understood I was not retiring. I want also to thank Christine Brakey and Darnell Hines for their grace and efficiency in doing all the heavy lifting to make this event the wonderful celebration it is. In addition, I want to thank all the speakers for appearing today to help me celebrate. They are all very prominent and accomplished individuals, and I am so very honored by their presence and their words. And now a few thank yous to the people I love. First, thank you to my wife, Karen. Karen, you and I both know I couldn't have done any of this without you. We met in college and have spent most of our lives together. I wouldn't have traded those years together for anything. And I am proud to say Karen is a very talented architect, and I am especially proud to live in one of her creations. I also want to thank my daughters, Jessica and Elisa. I am so very proud of both of them, not only because they have each contributed so much to their chosen fields, but because they are also wonderful, caring human beings. And a sincere thank you goes out to my students, both current and former, for every day reminding me why I chose to go into this profession in the first place. And finally, thanks to all of you for sharing this very special day with me. I will remember it for the rest of my life. Thank you.
That was wonderful. And I know we all just learned some history, which, as we've been learning all day, has been one of your many, many, many critical contributions. In acknowledgement of all that he has contributed to our law school, we will now unveil the beautiful portrait of Professor Redish that will hang in Marty Redish Hall in Levy-Mayer's second floor, together with all the ghosts. For the unveiling of the portrait, I would like to invite his family to the stage. And Marty, you can come too, yeah. Now, Professor Redish, our students have a little surprise for you.
Hi, Professor Redish. Reyes and I wanted to make this video for you just to remind you of how much of an impact you've had on your students throughout your years of teaching. When I look back on my first year of law school, one thing definitely stands out to me, and that's the mentorship and the kindness that you've shown me. Coming into law school as a first-generation student, I definitely didn't have any idea what I was doing or how to navigate the world that we're all in. And I definitely didn't believe in myself, but you believed in me and you gave me a chance before I believed in myself yet. And I will always be so, so grateful for that. I've learned so much from you, not just about areas of the law, but also about the kind of professor that I would want to be one day. So I hope that this video just reminds you how many people's lives you've touched, how much we love you, and how much we're so, so lucky to have you. You're truly the lifeline of this school, and we hope that you feel that way today. Thank you so much for everything.
Hi, Professor. Congratulations on getting your very own classroom at the law school. My classes with you have been my favorite, so much so that I consider myself a lucky punk to get to listen to them again as your TA. Thank you for always having my back and supporting me, even at 9 p.m. on Zoom the night before final exams.
Hey, Professor Redish. I just wanted to thank you for all you've done for me since the first day of 1L. You've been by far the most impactful professor I've had. You've given me so many wonderful opportunities. All your classes have been just a phenomenal learning experience, and I'm so grateful that I've gotten the chance to know you and work with you and learn from you, and I wish you all the best.
Congratulations, Professor Redish, on such an incredible accomplishment. I've only known you for a little over a year, and already you've had such a tremendous impact on the trajectory of my life, and for that I am so grateful. It is a privilege to be able to learn from you. You have a wealth of knowledge, a brilliantly insightful analytical mind, and also a hilarious and creative ability to communicate these ideas in entertaining, digestible, and memorable metaphors that we fondly call Professor Redishisms. Not only do you care so much about our learning, but you also care about us as people. You're so caringly invested in our lives and our future, and I don't know any other professor who is so dedicated and caring to his students than you are. Thank you so much for everything, and I look forward to all that we get to do together and all that I get to learn from you in the future. Congratulations!
Hi, Professor Redish. I wanted to pop in from DC to say thank you for completely defining my time at Northwestern, and thank you for teaching me about the Dormant Commerce Clause. I am so proud to be a member of the Professor Redish Alumni Network. Congratulations on the classroom, and thank you so much for everything.
Hi, Professor Redish. Thank you so much for finding a way to make civil procedure really, really fun. I'll always appreciate your jokes during class and the experience you gave me at Northwestern, and I'm so proud to have been able to work with you. Congrats on the classroom.
Hey, Professor Redish. Just want to congratulate you for 50 years at Northwestern and all the accomplishments you've had along the way. You convinced me to come to Northwestern, and I can't thank you enough for it. I've met great people, made great memories, and gotten to work on some really cool things, and I owe it all to you. Thank you so much.
You'll be hard-pressed to find a professor who has done more to positively impact the lives of his students and our profession more generally than Professor Redish. He influences how people think about the law in ways that nobody else can, and has probably done more to influence the law in our country than anyone in the last 100 years. Without Professor Redish's lecture on Cypress settlements, my law review note would never have come to fruition, and I credit him for almost single-handedly landing me my clerkships. I'm proud to be able to say that I was one of his students, and I will forever think fondly of him every time I see his name cited in an opinion or a law review article. Thanks for everything, Professor Redish.
Professor Redish, thank you for everything you have done for the legal profession, for Northwestern law, and for me. I would not be where I am today were it not for your years of guidance and support, and in my mind, you deserve all of the portraits and lecture halls and other awards and recognition Northwestern has to offer. It is a true privilege to have been one of your students. Congratulations, and thank you once again.
Professor Redish, I'm truly so grateful to have had you as a professor. It's been a privilege, and thank you so much for all the conversations that we've had in your office and for all the career advice and law school advice that you've given me. Wishing you many more years of teaching and changing students' lives.
Congratulations, Marty. For generations of students, you are synonymous with Northwestern Law School, and I'm glad to see that become part of the brick and mortar of the institution. Thank you for teaching me everything I know about civil procedure. Thank you for showing me what a great teacher and a committed scholar looks like, and thank you for showing me how to follow ideas wherever they lead. Congratulations.
Hi, Professor Redish. So happy people are celebrating you. You've given me some of my best moments in law school, made me fall in love with learning again. You've made my husband laugh when I rewatch your lectures at home. And thank you for signing my textbook yet again. And you're the only reason I keep saying dolphins and tuna, which people don't really understand, but I thank you.
Professor Redish, a great philosopher once said, "A man's got to know his limitations." And every day in class, I'm sorry that I don't have more to offer, but only because you showed me that I have more to offer. You showed me that though my grandfather picked scrap in a cart pulled by a mule, and my mother didn't finish elementary school, I do belong here, that I'm good enough to be here. Because if my work is good enough for you, then who is anyone else to say otherwise? And while I'm at it, I have to come clean about something. I don't know a damn thing about baseball. I grew up in a hair salon in Mexico, and I once spoke well of the Yankees in your office, and you've got to forgive me that indiscretion. I just didn't know. I didn't know any better. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for being a transformative teacher to so many of us.
Congratulations, Professor. I want to thank you for indulging all of my late night emails, for encouraging me to keep asking questions, even when, and maybe especially when, we come to completely different conclusions. I had a vague sense of wanting to be a law professor before I started school, but I didn't really know what that was supposed to look like. That's just another one of my many questions that you've effortlessly answered. When people ask me, what do I want my career to look like? I say, I want to be like Professor Redish. And I know I'm just one in a countless line of students who's come to that same conclusion. Thank you for being an inspiration. Congratulations on 50 years. And let's go Mets.
I can attest to that Professor Redish has been a key part of why I've loved law school so much. Because he didn't just teach us what the law was. He really made us think about why the law is the way that it is. He really got me passionate and interested in learning more about the theory underlying everything. He made me really think about my assumptions, and he challenged them. And for that, I can just say that, Professor Redish, I'm so immensely grateful for what you've done.